You know, in my 47 years of military service across this galaxy, I thought I had seen everything. Admiral Vashy, that's me, and let me tell you something. I was wrong. Dead wrong. And it all started on what should have been a perfectly ordinary day at the Galactic Combat Academy. The final examination. The big one. The test that separates the wheat from the chaff, the warriors from the weekend hobbyists. Every year, the Academy opens its doors to the galaxy's finest specimens, and every year, I get the honor of watching them beat the living daylights out of each other. It's supposed to be educational, character building, military tradition at its finest. The testing arena stretched out before us like a metallic coliseum, complete with energy barriers, automated medical drones hovering overhead like mechanical vultures, and enough firepower in the spectator boxes to level a small moon. Standard procedure, really. Can't have the observers getting caught in crossfire when things get messy. And believe me, they always get messy. This year's crop looked particularly impressive. 47 contestants from across known space, each one representing the absolute pinnacle of their species' combat prowess. We had the usual suspects, 3 Corinthians with their chitinous armor that could deflect plasma bolts, a pair of Vorthan berserkers whose rage-induced strength could crush titanium, and don't even get me started on the Zephyrian acid spitters. Nasty bunch, those ones. Their saliva could eat through hull plating in under 30 seconds. I was reviewing my notes, making mental calculations about which species would dominate this year's bloodbath, when something caught my eye. Something unusual. There, standing among these galactic titans of destruction, was what appeared to be a small pink creature. About 5.5 feet tall, maybe 120 pounds soaking wet, with absolutely no visible armor, weapons, or defensive modifications. It had long brown fur growing from its head, tied back in what I later learned humans call a ponytail, and was wearing some sort of simple grey fabric covering. Amy Kowalski. That was the name on the roster. Species, human. Homeworld Earth Sector 7 Alpha. Combat experience. Basic training, according to the file. Basic training? At the Galactic Combat Academy finals? I nearly choked on my nutrition supplement. The other contestants noticed her too. A massive Gorlakian, easily 8 feet of pure muscle and bone ridges, pointed one of his 4 arms at Amy and made what passed for laughter in his species. It sounded like rocks grinding together in a cement mixer. "Look at tiny flesh thing," he bellowed, in heavily accented galactic standard. "Is this joke? Where are her weapons? Her armor? Her combat augmentations?" A Corinthian warrior, resplendent in his natural carapace that gleamed like polished obsidian, clicked his mandibles in amusement. "Perhaps she is here for cleaning duties. My species requires no janitors, but others might find use for such delicate creatures." Amy, for her part, seemed completely oblivious to the mockery. She was examining her fingernails with the sort of casual interest one might reserve for checking the weather. Occasionally she'd glance around the arena with what I can only describe as mild boredom. The betting pools among the Academy staff were already forming. Commander Tom Marley was taking odds near the observation deck, his 4 eyes gleaming with entrepreneurial spirit. The Corinthian champions were the obvious favorites at 2-to-1 odds. The Vorthan berserkers came in second at 5-to-1. Even the smallest, most underestimated contestant, a nimble Skithori assassin known for her speed and poison claws, was getting better odds than the human. Amy Kowalski was sitting at a solid 5,000-to-1. "Anyone want to throw credits at the pink thing?" Commander Marley called out, waving a betting slip in the air. "I'll give you 10,000-to-1 if you're feeling particularly charitable today." The laughter that followed was loud enough to activate the arena's sound dampeners. Judge Quintara, our resident expert on interspecies combat regulations, was studying Amy through a pair of high-powered optical enhancers. "I've reviewed the documentation 3 times, she muttered to herself, her tentacles twitching with confusion. "Everything appears to be in order. The human has passed all preliminary requirements. Basic fitness assessments, medical clearances, psychological evaluations, all within acceptable parameters for her species." "But look at her," protested Quartermaster A, gesturing wildly with 2 of his appendages. She's just standing there. No pre-combat rituals, no intimidation displays, no weapons checks. She's not even stretching. True enough. While the other contestants were performing elaborate warm-up routines, sharpening claws, testing armor joints, and generally preparing for mortal combat, Amy had found a comfortable spot near the arena wall and was waiting, just waiting, like she was in line at a grocery store or something equally mundane. The Zephyrian acid spitter, nearest to her, kept a respectful distance, probably worried that any sudden movement might accidentally harm the fragile-looking creature. Even the most bloodthirsty warriors in the galaxy had standards about picking on someone so obviously outmatched. Admiral Drahorn leaned over to whisper in my ear, "Vashy, old friend, should we perhaps suggest the human withdraw? This seems less like combat and more like assisted suicide. The paperwork alone would be a nightmare." I was about to agree when the arena's announcement system crackled to life. The preliminary phase was ending. In just a few minutes, the instructor would give the command to begin, and 47 of the galaxy's most dangerous beings would attempt to prove their superiority through controlled violence. All except Amy Kowalski, who had apparently found something fascinating about the arena's ceiling and was now staring upward with the sort of mild interest one might show when cloud-watching on a lazy afternoon. If only we had known what was coming next. Commander Tom Marley cleared his throat, a sound that resembled a malfunctioning air recycler, and addressed the growing crowd of confused spectators. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted sentient beings," he announced, his four eyes rotating independently to take in the entire observation deck. "For those of you new to Academy combat protocols, allow me to explain the rules." A Nebarian diplomat raised what might have been a hand. "Commander, forgive my ignorance. But why is there a maintenance worker in the arena?" "That's not maintenance personnel," Marley replied, consulting his datapad. "That's contestant number 47, Amy Kowalski of Earth. She's actually competing." The silence that followed was so profound you could have heard a pin drop in vacuum. Meanwhile, down in the arena, the pre-combat displays were reaching peak intensity. The three Corinthian champions had formed a triangle and were performing their traditional dance of inevitable death, which involved a lot of mandible clicking, carapace rattling, and what sounded like threats against each other's egg layers. It was terrifying and beautiful in the way that only lethal things can be. Amy had found a small piece of debris on the arena floor, and was now using it to clean dirt from under her fingernails. The Vorthan berserkers had begun their rage-building ritual, which consisted of beating their chests hard enough to generate small sonic booms and roaring challenges that made the arena's structural supports vibrate. Their muscles were literally swelling with combat hormones, adding another foot to their already impressive 12-foot frames. Amy yawned. Judge Quintara's tentacles were practically vibrating with nervous energy as she activated the arena's communication system. "Attention, contestants," her voice echoed through the space. "Today's combat scenario is simple. Last being standing wins. No weapons restrictions, no environmental limitations, no mercy rules. Medical drones will extract any contestant who becomes unviable for continued participation." At this announcement, the Zephyrian acid spitters began secreting their combat pheromones, filling their section of the arena with a greenish mist that made the air itself look angry. These weren't just any Zephyrians either. These were military-grade specimens, each one capable of spitting concentrated acid with sniper rifle accuracy at distances up to 50 meters. Their throat sacs were already swelling in preparation. But the real crowd pleasers were the representatives from General Krafnog's home world. I'd never seen anything quite like them before. Imagine, if you will, a cross between a grizzly bear and a battle tank, covered in natural armor plating that had evolved specifically to deflect energy weapons. They stood 9 feet tall on their hind legs, possessed claws that could shred reinforced steel, and had redundant organ systems that made them nearly impossible to kill quickly. One of them was currently demonstrating his flexibility by bending backwards far enough to touch his spine to the ground, all while maintaining eye contact with potential opponents. It was the kind of display that said, "I'm not just going to kill you, I'm going to make it anatomically interesting." Amy had apparently finished with her fingernails and was now examining the stitching on her grey fabric covering. The smaller contestants weren't being outdone either. The Skithari assassin was performing a series of movements so fast they appeared as blurs to the naked eye, her poison claws leaving brief trails of luminescent toxin in the air. A pair of crystalline ethereals were harmonizing at frequencies that made nearby metal objects resonate, their bodies glowing with stored energy. Through it all, Amy stood in her corner of the arena like someone waiting for a delayed transport shuttle. She'd occasionally glance at the other contestants with what appeared to be polite interest, the way you might look at street performers while walking to work. The instructor, Moran, finally took his position at the arena's center. Moran was old-school military, a grizzled veteran from the Centauri conflicts who'd seen more combat than the rest of us combined. He stood 7 feet tall, had scars that told stories of a dozen different wars, and possessed a voice that could be heard across a battlefield without amplification. "Contestants," he bellowed, and 46 alien warriors snapped to attention. Amy looked up from whatever she'd been studying on the ground and gave him a little wave. Moran straightened to his full imposing height and began what we all knew would be his traditional pre-combat speech. The man loved his speeches almost as much as he loved watching students beat each other senseless. "Warriors of the galaxy," his voice boomed across the arena, causing several smaller spectators to reflexively duck behind their seats. "Today you stand upon the threshold of greatness. Here in this sacred arena you will prove yourselves worthy of the title graduate through trial by combat." The Corinthian champions raised their arms in salute, their carapaces gleaming under the arena lights. The Vorthan berserkers roared approval, even the usually stoic ethereals pulsed with increased luminosity. Amy appeared to be examining a scuff mark on her shoe. "Honor," Moran continued, his scarred face flushed with the passion of his words. "Courage, skill, these are the virtues that separate the strong from the weak, the worthy from the unworthy. Today 47 enter, but only one shall emerge victorious." The tension in the arena was so thick you could have cut it with a plasma cutter. 46 of the galaxy's most lethal beings crouched in combat positions, muscles tensed, weapons ready, enhanced senses focused on their opponents. Combat hormones flooded bloodstreams, predatory instincts sharpened to razor points, hearts pounded with anticipation. Amy checked her wrist chronometer and sighed softly. "The rules are simple," Moran declared, his voice building to its crescendo. "No quarter asked, none given. Fight with everything you have, show no mercy, prove your worth through strength, speed and cunning. Let the galaxy witness the birth of a true warrior." The Zephyrian acid spitters had positioned themselves for maximum coverage, their throat sacs fully distended and ready to spray death. General Kraftknog's people had spread out in a defensive formation, their natural armor plates locked and loaded. The Skithari assassin had become practically invisible, blending with shadows that shouldn't have existed under the arena's uniform lighting. In the observation deck, everyone leaned forward. Betting slips were clutched in sweaty appendages. Medical drones descended to optimal intervention positions. Security barriers hummed to life. Amy was now looking at the ceiling again, apparently having found something mildly interesting in the ventilation system. Moran raised his arm high above his head, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the arena. "Prepare yourselves for glory." The silence that followed was absolute. 46 alien warriors poised on the knife's edge of violence, every fiber of their beings focused on the coming battle. Respiratory systems slowed. Time seemed to stretch like elastic. Amy yawned. Then Moran's arm came down like a falling asteroid, and his voice shattered the silence like a thunderclap. "Begin?" What happened next lasted exactly 0.3 seconds by the arena's atomic chronometers, but those 0.3 of a second were witnessed from 46 different perspectives, each more confused than the last. The Corinthian champion later reported seeing a brief pink blur that seemed to be everywhere at once, followed by a gentle tap on his carapace that somehow sent him flying backward into the arena wall. The Vorthan berserker swore he felt a light touch on his shoulder, barely noticeable, right before the world spun sideways and he found himself embedded in the floor. The Zephyrian acid spitter claimed that something politely tapped him on the head mid-spit, redirecting his acid stream upward toward the ceiling while simultaneously launching him into a perfect arc that ended with him unconscious in the medical drone's collection net. General Krafnorg's representative insisted that a small hand had simply pressed against his chest plate, but the next thing he knew, he was looking up at the arena lights from a position that suggested he'd been gently placed on his back like a sleeping child. The Skitheri assassin, with reflexes so fast they bordered on precognitive, reported sensing movement behind her spinning to counterattack, and then nothing. Just waking up in a neat pile with the other contestant. From our perspective in the observation deck, here's what we saw, Maran said. Begin. Amy took a single step forward. There was a brief pink blur that seemed to occupy multiple positions simultaneously, and then suddenly 46 unconscious alien warriors were arranged in a tidy heap in the center of the arena. The whole thing was over before any of us could blink. Amy stood exactly where she'd started, dusting off her hands with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just finished a mildly tedious chore. She looked around the arena, taking in the smoking crater where the Zephyrian acid had hit the ceiling, the unconscious pile of galactic warriors, and the absolute silence from 47 different species of observer. Was that it? She asked, her voice carrying clearly in the stunned quiet. Can I go get lunch now? I heard you guys have really good cafeteria food here. The silence stretched for approximately 15 seconds before Admiral Drohorn's voice cut through the observation deck like a rusty saw blade. What in the name of the 7 spiral arms just happened? He bellowed, his normally composed demeanor cracking like cheap armor plating. Security. I want every camera angle, every sensor reading, every quantum fluctuation detector reading from the last 60 seconds. Now. The security technicians scrambled over their consoles like their careers depended on it, which, considering Drohorn's expression, they probably did. Within moments, holographic displays flickered to life around the observation deck, showing the arena from 47 different angles. Run it back, Drohorn commanded. Standard speed first. We watched the footage, Moran said. Begin. There was Amy, standing casually. Then there was Amy, still standing casually, except now 46 unconscious warriors were piled neatly in the center of the arena. No visible movement, no flash of energy, no indication that anything had happened at all. Again Drohorn growled, half speed. Same result. Amy, before. Pile of warriors, Amy after. The camera systems, designed to track plasma bolts and hypersonic projectiles, had somehow completely missed whatever had just occurred. Quarter speed, nothing. 1/10 speed. Still nothing. Judge Quintara's tentacles were now twitching so violently they looked like they were having seizures. Try frame-by-frame analysis, she suggested in a voice that was trying very hard to remain professional. The technician's multiple eyes went wide. Ma'am, these cameras operate at 10,000 frames per second. Frame-by-frame analysis will take... I don't care if it takes all day. Drohorn snapped. I want to know what happened. Meanwhile, Quartermaster A had pulled out his personal calculation device and was muttering mathematical formulas under his breath. His species was renowned for their analytical abilities, capable of processing complex physics equations in real time during combat scenarios. Let me see, he mumbled, his appendages dancing across the device's interface. If we assume the human somehow moved fast enough to physically contact all 46 contestants in 0.3 seconds, his device made a sound like a dying computer. That would require no. That's impossible. The energy requirements alone would... He tried again. Perhaps if she used some form of teleportation technology. Another error sound. But the quantum displacement field would have been detected by our sensors. His device actually started smoking. Amy, who had been patiently waiting near the arena entrance, finally spoke up. Excuse me, is there some kind of problem? I mean, you said to fight until there was only one person standing, right? So I just moved really fast and tapped everyone. Was I supposed to do something else? The observation deck fell silent again. Commander Tom Mully slowly turned to stare at Amy, his 4 eyes focusing on her with the intensity of targeting lasers. You tapped them, he asked in a voice that suggested he was reconsidering several life choices. Well, yeah, Amy replied, shrugging. I mean, I didn't want to hurt anyone. They all seemed like nice people. Nice beings? Whatever. So I just gave them little taps to put them to sleep. Is that not how this works? At that moment, the medical bay's communication system crackled to life. Dr. Morton's voice, usually calm and clinical, carried a note of barely controlled hysteria. Admiral Vashy, we have a situation down here. All 46 contestants are conscious and physically unharmed, but they're exhibiting identical symptoms. Each one reports being gently tapped, followed by immediate unconsciousness. No trauma, no energy weapon burns, no toxin exposure, just taps. Define taps, Doctor, I managed to say, though my voice sounded strange even to myself. Well, sir, the interesting thing is that each contestant shows microscopic evidence of contact at a single point on their body. The Corinthian's carapace shows a finger-sized pressure mark. The Vorthan Berserker has a palm print on his shoulder. The Zephyrian has what appears to be a gentle poke mark on his cranium. All delivered with exactly the right amount of force to trigger their species' unconsciousness reflex without causing any actual damage. Quartermaster, A looked up from his smoking calculation device. Doctor, are you suggesting that this human somehow calculated the exact pressure points and force requirements for 46 different alien physiologies in real time? That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Dr. Morton replied. Furthermore, I've been analyzing the timeline. Based on the contestants' positions when they fell unconscious, she would have had to move in a pattern that covered the entire arena floor in roughly 0.28 seconds. The physics of that should be impossible. Should be? Judge Quintara asked weakly. Well, I've been researching human baseline capabilities while treating the contestants, Dr. Morton continued. According to the data I've found, human reaction times are typically rated at around 0.25 seconds. However, this appears to be their conscious reaction time. Their subconscious reflexes operate significantly faster. How much faster? Admiral Drahorn demanded. Based on what I just witnessed, their nervous system appears capable of processing and responding to threats in microseconds. What we consider moving really fast might be, for them, roughly equivalent to walking. Amy had wandered over to where the frame-by-frame analysis was still running. Oh hey, there I am, she said cheerfully, pointing at a display that showed her as a barely visible pink streak. Wow, your cameras are really good. Most security systems can't even catch that much detail when humans move at normal combat speed. Normal combat speed. The observation deck fell silent for the third time in 10 minutes. In the distance we could hear the soft hum of medical drones delivering the unconscious contestants to the recovery bay, and the gentle sound of Quartermaster A's calculation device finally giving up and shutting itself down in defeat. Amy checked her chronometer. Again. So, about that lunch, I'm actually getting pretty hungry, and I've heard really good things about your quantum soup. Judge Quintara sat in her office staring at a blank official form that was supposed to document the Academy's final examination results. Her tentacles twitched spasmodically as she tried to figure out how to write a report that wouldn't get her committed to a mental health facility. Combat duration 0.3 seconds, she muttered, then erased it. Method of victory, gentle tapping, erased that too. Casualties none, but 46 warriors are questioning their life choices. She crumpled up the form and reached for a fresh one. 3 floors up, an emergency council meeting was in session. The Academy's senior staff had assembled in the crisis management chamber, a room normally reserved for dealing with student uprisings, diplomatic incidents, and the occasional case of someone accidentally creating a black hole in the physics lab. Colleagues, Admiral Drahorn began, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd just watched reality take a coffee break. We have a problem. According to Academy regulations, Amy Kowalski has officially graduated with the highest combat rating possible. The question is, what do we do about it? Commander Tom Marley raised one of his hands. Could we perhaps not tell anyone? Maybe file the whole thing under classified training exercise and pretend it never happened. 46 witnesses, Quartermaster A pointed out glumly. His calculation device had been replaced with a basic abacus after the earlier smoking incident, plus security footage, plus medical records, plus the fact that every major military academy in the galaxy is going to want to know why our final examination lasted less time than it takes to blink. Dr. Morton's voice crackled through the communication system from the medical bay. Gentlemen, ladies, and assorted beings, I have an update. I've been interviewing the contestants, and they're all asking the same question: where can they sign up for whatever training program produced Amy Kowalski? Down in the cafeteria, Amy had indeed found the quantum soup, and she was not impressed. "Excuse me," she said to the food service technician, a pleasant Altarian, with 6 arms and a customer service smile, "but I think there might be something wrong with this soup. It tastes like nothing, but also everything, but mostly nothing." "That's quantum soup, ma'am," the technician explained helpfully. "It exists in a superposition of all possible flavors until observed by the consumer's taste buds, at which point it collapses into the most statistically probable flavor preference." Amy poked at it with her spoon. "Could I just get a sandwich instead? Maybe some of that processed meat stuff? I'm not really in the mood for probability-based nutrition." The technician's smile faltered. "And I'm not sure we have anything that simple, ma'am. Our food replication systems are designed for sophisticated palates. We have 17 different varieties of synthesized noble gas essence, photon-infused beverages, and a lovely selection of crystallized time particles." "Right," Amy sighed. "Do you guys have anything that used to be alive and is now just food, without any physics involved?" Before the increasingly confused technician could respond, the cafeteria doors burst open and a human male strode in, looking harried and slightly out of breath. He was wearing what appeared to be formal diplomatic attire, though it looked like he'd been running. "Amy Kowalski," he called out, scanning the room. "That's me," Amy replied, waving her spoon. "Are you here about the exam thing? Because I think there might be some kind of misunderstanding. Everyone seems really upset about it." The man approached her table and extended his hand. "Brandon Torres, Earth Diplomatic Corps. I'm here to collect you before you accidentally start an interstellar incident." "Too late for that," Amy said cheerfully, shaking his hand. "I think I broke their graduation test. Also, their food is weird. What's a crystallized time particle supposed to taste like?" Brandon winced. "Amy, please tell me you didn't use advanced combat techniques during the examination." "Advanced?" Amy looked confused. "No, I just did the basic stuff we learned in training, you know, speed, precision, non-lethal takedowns, standard human military basics." Brandon's face went through several color changes. "Amy, what exactly did they tell you this examination was for?" "Combat graduation, last person standing wins. So I made sure I was the last person standing." She paused. "Was I supposed to let them hit me first? Because that seems kind of inefficient." At that moment, Brandon's communication device chimed with an incoming message. He glanced at it and his face went pale. "Amy," he said slowly, "I just received a priority communication from the Academy administration. They want to know about your training background. Specifically, they want to know how Earth's basic training compares to their elite combat preparation programs." "Oh, that's easy," Amy replied, finally giving up on the quantum soup. "Basic training is just the stuff everyone learns before they get assigned to real military units. You know, standard physical conditioning, basic combat reflexes, simple hand-to-hand techniques. Nothing fancy." Brandon stared at her. "Amy, what percentage of Earth's population completes basic training?" "Pretty much everyone who wants to join the military," she said with a shrug. "It's the entry-level stuff. They only accept people into basic training if they're average or above average in physical and mental capabilities." "Why?" Brandon's communication device chimed again. Then again. Then it started chiming continuously, as priority messages flooded in from Academy officials, Earth Command, and what appeared to be several galactic news networks. "Amy," he said faintly, "I think you need to understand something. What you just did. That 0.3-second victory against 46 of the galaxy's elite warriors? The Academy considers that the most impressive combat display in their 1,000-year history." Amy blinked. "Really? But it was just basic stuff. I mean, back home, my little brother could probably do the same thing and he's only 16. The chiming from Brandon's communication device stopped. Then it made a sound like a small electronic device having an existential crisis and shut down completely. In the distance they could hear Admiral Drahorn's voice echoing through the Academy's corridors. "Someone get me Earth Command on the line, now." 3 weeks later, I found myself reviewing the Academy's new admissions policies. And let me tell you, they made for some interesting reading. Policy Amendment 84.7 Alpha now stated, in very clear terms, that human applicants would be required to undergo specialized evaluation procedures before being admitted to any combat program. These procedures included psychological assessments to determine whether the applicant understood the concept of holding back, and mandatory demonstrations of their minimum effort capabilities. The amendment also established the first ever interspecies safety protocols, which basically meant that humans would be competing in their own category from now on. The official reason given was to ensure fair competition among participants. The unofficial reason, which everyone understood perfectly, was to prevent Amy Kowalski incidents from becoming a regular occurrence. My final log entries as senior military observer made for fascinating reading, if I do say so myself. Here's an excerpt. Personal log, Admiral Vashy, Day 8047 of Service Year 2030-87. I am officially recommending that human threat assessment levels be upgraded from minor regional concern to galactic recalibration event. This classification is normally reserved for species capable of single-handedly altering the balance of power across multiple star systems. After reviewing the data from the Academy incident, I believe this classification may actually be insufficient. Additional note, I have submitted a formal request to the Galactic Threat Assessment Bureau to create an entirely new classification level above Galactic Recalibration Event. I suggest we call it Universal Paradigm Shift, and reserve it exclusively for humanity. Amy, for her part, had said goodbye to everyone with the same casual politeness she'd shown throughout her entire visit. She shook hands with the Academy staff, thanked them for the interesting experience, and mentioned that she was looking forward to trying some normal food when she got back to Earth. "This was fun," she told Judge Quintara while signing her graduation certificate. "You guys should really consider updating your cafeteria menu though. I mean, quantum soup is neat and all, but sometimes you just want a burger, you know." Judge Quintara had nodded mutely and made a note to add simple Earth food options to the facility improvement requests. Brandon Torres had escorted Amy off the station, but not before she stopped by the medical bay to check on the other contestants. She'd been genuinely concerned about them, asking Dr. Morton if everyone was feeling okay, and if there were any hard feelings about the whole gentle tapping incident. The contestants, all 46 of them, had stared at her with expressions ranging from awe to existential dread. The Corinthian champion had actually asked for her autograph, which she'd provided cheerfully, completely oblivious to the fact that she'd just signed what would probably become the most valuable piece of memorabilia in galactic military history. Those same contestants had formed an informal support group that met every Tuesday in Conference Room C. They called themselves the Tapped, and spent their meetings trying to process what had happened to them. The Vorthan Berserker had become particularly philosophical about the experience, often beginning conversations with statements like, "You know, before I met that human I thought I understood the nature of combat." The Skitheri assassin had actually requested a transfer to Earth to study human movement techniques, though her application was still pending review by approximately 17 different bureaucratic departments, each of which was trying to figure out if allowing an alien assassin to study human combat methods violated any interstellar treaties. Instructor Moran's early retirement application had been approved with unprecedented speed. The man who had trained some of the galaxy's most feared warriors for over 30 years had submitted a resignation letter that simply read, "I have trained students to fight aliens, robots, and interdimensional beings. I am not qualified to train anyone to fight humans." Respectfully submitted, Moran. He'd been replaced by a holographic training system, partly because no living instructor was willing to take the position, and partly because the Academy figured that if humans ever showed up for training again, a hologram would be easier to repair. As I write these final notes, I find myself wondering if the galaxy was truly ready to meet humanity on equal terms. We'd spent centuries building our military academies, our combat doctrines, our understanding of warfare and conflict. We'd created systems designed to identify and train the absolute pinnacle of alien combat capability. And then Amy Kowalski showed up and politely demonstrated that our pinnacle was her starting point. The truly terrifying part wasn't that she was exceptional among her kind. The truly terrifying part was that she kept insisting she was average. Just a regular human being with basic training who wanted to try something new and maybe get some lunch afterward. If Amy Kowalski represents the baseline for human military capability, then I have to ask, what do their actual soldiers look like? I'm not sure I want to find out, but I have a feeling that the galaxy is going to meet them eventually, whether we're ready or not. Admiral Vashy, final log entry, Galactic Combat Academy. Note to future military observers, if a human ever shows up to your training facility and describes their abilities as nothing special, immediately implement Code Black evacuation procedures and call for diplomatic backup, and maybe keep some simple food on hand. They seem to appreciate that.